Hello everybody, and welcome back to our weekly coverage of Juni Taisen Zodiac War, here with our review of Episode 9, The Man Who Chases Two Rabbits Catches Neither. I'm LumRanmaYasha, and this'll be another solo review because my co-host, Lord GTZ, ended up getting axed off like one of the Tetsumi brothers after all. Nah, Lord's okay, and should hopefully be back next week, but I can't say the same for Dragon. He dies within the first 2 minutes of this episode, and while I wasn't expecting much more from him, I was expecting more of a fight before he went down. His quick and flippin' death makes the last 2 episodes feel like a waste of time, because Dragon contributed so little to the Zodiac War in life that he might as well have been killed off screen. That would have saved us 2 weeks worth of bloated flashbacks for the show's least interesting characters. Dragon's arc is the perfect example of how the anime's insistence on following the novel's 1 chapter per Zodiac structure results in them extending storylines that didn't need as much time and truncating those that could have used more developing. Rather than devoting so much time to the Tatsumi brothers' past, I'd have preferred if they had rewritten their roles in the Zodiac War to give them something more interesting to do, even if that meant diverging from the plot of the novel. This is why blind faithfulness in adaptations are so often a weakness. However, I will credit the show on spicing up Dragon's death a little bit through a very well storyboarded sequence showing how Rabbit finds Dragon and has Monkey give him a cheerleader jump to zip high above him. In the light novel, Snake's head just plops in Dragon's arms, bites him, and then Rabbit slices him in half from behind. In the anime, Dragon sees Rabbit fly by him so quickly he can't even process what he's seen until his brother's head falls into his arms. I just like that small touch a lot, and it helps give the scene a more continuous flow, giving us a better sense of where the characters are positioned, as opposed to in a light novel where characters seem to pop in and out of locations at happenstance. The episode and its idiom are named after Rabbit, and specifically refers to how both him and Dragon made the mistake of trying to take out 2 opponents, ending up defeating neither, though I wouldn't count Rabbit out just yet. However, despite the title and pattern of previous weeks, this episode is not actually about Rabbit, and he only features in brief fight scenes at the beginning and end of it. Instead, the meat of this week is devoted to Tiger's backstory. I was hoping the anime would do what the light novel neglected and give Rabbit a past, a context for why he is the way he is, like we've come to learn about the other Zodiacs. Alas, they've chosen not to make something up on their own, another weakness of them sticking too close to only what's written in the original text. But luckily, Tiger's backstory is engaging enough to forgive this. Hers is a simple story, in many ways a mirror to Monkey's. Like Monkey, Tiger was trained to be a martial artist from an early age, and had a peaceful life outside of her training. When she had mastered her skills, she was instructed to seek out battlefields upon which to hone her craft. But whereas Monkey never lost her idealism despite the horrors of war, they were too much for Tiger to bear, and she became disillusioned to her Boo and Michi, her warrior's code of honor. She drowned her sorrows in booze at an early age. It's implied she was still a high schooler when she fought in her first war, and becoming drunk became a crutch to help her enjoy the act of killing and forget about the guilt she feels and the trauma she's experienced. By accident, she also lucidly realizes the drunken fist technique by randomly following on all fours after getting wasted one night, and realizes that she's fast and limber fighting like a wild beast, and starts to do that instead of her traditional martial art style. This is serendipitous, because degrading herself to the state of a drunken animal helps Tiger justify her actions to herself, equating her murders to an animalistic primal natural instinct of living creatures, much like it is a necessity for any carnivore to consume the flesh and blood of their prey in order to survive. Tiger needs the booze and blood of her enemies in order to live, their nutrition for her soul, and drown out her conscience and wash her mind clean of doubt. She's in so far deep that she can't stop killing and drinking. She needs to do it in order to live with herself and what she's become. She's really stopped living and is going through the motions, adopting a nihilistic attitude towards life and death. No wonder she spent half of the war drinking away without a care in the world, because she doesn't care whether she lives, wins, or dies anymore. It's too much to think about. It's too hard to think about. It's much easier to go with the flow and see what happens. At least that's what I think her mindset was until the tail end of the episode. This episode really should have been named after Tiger, because everything in and outside her flashback develops her arc. Her fight with Dragon has her stop relying on drunken instinct and formulate a strategy to take out her undead opponent. When we've previously seen Tiger fight, she's never in a sober state of mind, really understanding where she is or what she's doing. But at the end of the episode, when we take a look at her face, when she's about to face off with Ox, we can see a noticeable change. The Tiger we see at the end of this episode is no longer a drunkard flailing around unconcerned about what happens to her, but of someone composed, excited for the fight to come. By fighting alongside Ox, she's clearly grown a begrudging respect for him, but moreover, a sense that she's finally met a warrior who can give her something she hasn't had in a long time, an honorable, worthy opponent, and a fair fight. Reading deeper, she might see Ox as someone who can give her something else she wanted, something that would stop her descent into depravity, somebody who could help bring her back to who she once was, even if that means ending her life in order to do so. Content-wise, Tiger's arc is the most compelling the show has been since Monkey's episode, but what really elevates this material is the excellent storyboarding supporting these ideas. Right from the very beginning with Rabbit and Dragon's fight, this episode is stylistically marked with shortcuts with short but fluidly animated bursts of motion, sold by dynamic keyframes and poses we linger on to let the impact of the action sink in. The fight between Tiger, Ox, Snake, and Dragon is especially impressive for not just the excellent action animation, but the use of the camera to create a sense of dynamism as characters are fighting and flying through the environment. The animation itself is still limited for the most part, but the storyboarding gives the action a sense of depth within the environment that makes it appear more impressive and leaves a great impression on the audience through the chaotically captivating motion of the camera and characters. It's exciting to watch, and that's something I haven't been able to say about Juni Taisen's action scenes since the first episode. And it definitely helps that the fight between Tiger and Ox and the Tatsumi brothers feels like a real fight where both sides are giving their best efforts, making the conclusion of it feel complete, rather than an anti-climax like most of the other Zodiac's deaths have been. Not to say the episode is free of those anticlimaxes, as it concludes with Tiger and Ox slicing up Rabbit in seemingly one go. Now, even if you haven't read the novel, it's safe to predict this is not the end of Rabbit. One clever thing they did in this sequence was right before Rabbit was struck, they showed a close-up of him biting his tongue. Remember that for next week. I think it'll be important. This episode ended up adapting the remaining half of the Dragon chapter and the entirety of the Rabbit chapter. So even though she got plenty of focus already, I'm expecting the show to double down on Tiger next week. Outside of Tiger's flashback, the show was very faithful to the novel's content this week, and got across all the pertinent information, without nearly as much repetition and redundancy. As the novel has progressed, I have found that it has reiterated its points and its obvious aspects of the plot so much that it has become more of a chore to read and takes far longer to get its point across than the anime has. The opposite problem from when the show began. For reference, it took me the same amount of time to read the corresponding light novel content than it did to watch this episode. And because this episode explores Tiger's backstory, which is something the light novel doesn't do, the light novel actually has less content in it than this episode does. In the past, I've recommended the light novel storytelling over the animes, but at this stage, even though the show has its flaws and flips, I definitely recommend the anime version more for having both more content and less redundant exposition. Now that I have become deeply invested in Tiger's character arc, I'm really excited to see what happens with her next week, as well as the real conclusion to Rabbit's involvement in the war. The anime didn't mention this, but Rabbit has also sent Monkey after Rat, and that's another encounter I'm curious to see play out. Honestly, reviewing this show felt like a chore these past few weeks, so I'm really jazzed at how excited I am to talk about it again. This week was a huge leap up for Juni Taisen, and has finally gotten me legitimately excited to watch next week's episode, instead of just looking forward to the promise of next week like I have in weeks past. And that, I think, needs to be celebrated. So,
everybody clap your hands!